Well, here I am standing next to a Roman legionnaire. Legionary called Lucius. Thank you very much for joining us, Lucius. As we said earlier on in the piece, we're up on the green and they're digging for Roman artifacts. Now, Lucius, as a member of the Roman army, is here to help them identify any bits and pieces that they find. But he's also come in full regalia, and so we're going to have a chat with him about that. First of all, Lucius, tell us about your weaponry.
Okay, you've got two weapons that you can use at a distance. So you've got the spear. Now, the advantage of a spear is that you can also use it obviously to get food. In fact, basically the spear was designed for hunting.
Okay, right.
Now, that is a problem on a battlefield because if you throw a spear, they're obviously sharp up here, but they're very strong here, so they won't break. Okay. So this can be thrown back at you if you've thrown it at an enemy.
I see, right.
So the Romans then invent the javelin, which is this one, with a hardened tip, and the metal here is left, in metal terms, fairly soft.
Okay.
Now, when this punches through a shield like so, the weight of the wood starts to bend. It will start to bend round, rather like the metal in a staple when you push it through the machine.
Right, okay, yeah.
So this gets hooked into a shield. Now, of course, as a Roman soldier, I've got the helmet, the body armour, the sword, the full equipment. Rome is very rich. It can equip its soldiers with all the equipment.
Right.
The people in Wiltshire probably don't have many helmets, they don't have much body armour, their main protection is the shield. If this takes the shield out of use, the Romans have got even more of an advantage. And hopefully people are going to think, well, if I can't defend myself, it's better to go home and start running.
Well,
there's a real idea behind this.
I was going to say, I couldn't odds them for that. If I can hold that, if I may, it's an incredible piece of equipment. It really is, and so well thought out as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
And okay, I'm sure this is the one that all the school children are interested in. The short sword.
Short sword. As you can see, very awkward to draw.
Okay.
Because with the very big shield, you can't have the sword on your right side.
Oh.
And this is the sword itself.
Why is it such a short sword?
Because you work as a team of 8.
Okay.
So you're working very close to, so we're rather like a combine harvester. In other words, the Celts, to an extent, they believe in individual glory, so they use a longer sword, but with a longer sword you need a lot bigger area to use it because you're swinging it. Unfortunately with this, you stab people. You can swing it, but you are actually designed to stab.
So the Hollywood version, quite frankly, doesn't really make sense for that type of sword.
Well, no, in a Hollywood film, you're trying to make it look exciting to the audience. You want the stars in the film, rather like the two in Troy, the two famous stars that fight the famous duel. You want them to be prominent. But it's one of those questions of you're doing a drama, and a very good drama, you're not actually doing a documentary history.
I see. Right.
Whereas when you wear this and you look at this, some of the ways they would have used this would have been different.
I see. And okay, you've got a dagger here, which obviously would have been utilised either as a weapon or for whatever.
Look, it is actually shaped as a weapon, and the interesting thing is the handle is made for the individual.
Right.
And you use iron because the iron obviously sticks to your flesh. Brass, many people like brass hand grips. Brass obviously is smooth, and you don't want a 1.5 kilogram razor sharp object falling on your foot.
Right, no, no, of course not. Okay, well that's the weaponry covered, which arguably I suppose is what all the school children are interested in.
Yes, they are.
But the Roman soldier, of course, was interested in his own preservation as well. So, and the armour was very, very well thought out in its configuration. Would you explain to ladies and gentlemen what?
Okay, what you have here is an armour that's called segmentata. It's 38 bits of basically iron. And if I show you how it's put together on a system of leather straps. So in a way, you're rather like an armadillo. Now, it's very tight in to the body. Possibly that is not the way the Romans would have worn it, because a blow onto this will still hurt you. But most of the blow is taken round the armour rather than having bits forced into you.
I see. Okay.
And this is the type of armour the Romans have developed about 50 years before they come to Britain. And there is a piece of this armour actually from Wiltshire. There was a piece found near Aldbourne. So that's evidence that the Romans in Wiltshire are wearing this armour.
And one sees and reads what an organised organised army the Romans were. When you mentioned Armadillo, is that what they call when they all lock together with their shields?
No, that's the famous tortoise, and what you do there is you have the smallest people at the front, and they angle the shield like this. So all you're seeing is the person's eyes and boots, and then each rank behind puts their shield over the person in front.
So the person
So they're working as a team. The whole thing is very, very enforced teamwork.
Okay. And how many would they have in an average team, should we say?
You've got an 8-man tent party, so you've got an 8-man team. Now that's very good because you've got 8 people, or you've got 2 teams of 4, or 4 teams of 2. In the tortoise, it's likely that the biggest tortoise you could do, and we all remember mathematics here, is 8 across and 8 deep. Now why 8 deep? Because as your shields are going on top of each other, there's going to be a limit to exactly how many people you can have in a line. And this is the type of thing that you look at. You try and look at what we find in bits in the ground in Wiltshire in England, and you try and put the person inside the actual armour and what they can then do with it.
That's absolutely fascinating, because I mean, did the Romans fear the British as a fragmented force, or did they see them as a relatively easy force to beat because they weren't as organised as the Romans?
In the very first battle, the battle takes 2 days. Now, battles like Roundway Down in the Civil War near Devizes, and some of the famous Saxon versus Danes battles in Wiltshire, they are over in minutes. If you met an enemy, and you're talking a Roman army that's been picked and trained, rather like the soldiers from Wiltshire that went to Normandy after D-Day, if it was a 2-day battle, they may have thought they were in for a pushover before they arrived, but after that 2-day battle they wouldn't. They took the best team that Rome had, and they held them up for a day. And you think, well, yes, that gives you an idea, and of course that may have influenced them into talking more to people rather than fighting people.
So they gave a pretty good account of themselves then?
Oh yes, I mean they're brave people, they're fighting for what they believe in, they're fighting for their families and their homes. And there are people who do not want to be Roman. There's the famous Caractacus that retreats all the way to Wales. The man does not want to be under Roman rule. And of course he goes to Rome and he says to Caesar Claudius, the man that orders the invasion of Britain, you've got these fine marble temples, why did you want our mud huts? And the man actually literally reprieves him from execution and gives him a house in Rome. I know it might be politics, but you'd like to think there was a more genuine feeling to that episode.
Absolutely, well, possibly one warrior talking to another warrior.
Yes, quite frankly, yes. Have you got that?
Yeah, beautiful.
Now, you imagine in the tortoise where you're very close together, moving as one. If you get out of step, you either end up with hobnails on your toes, or a boot being scraped down the back of your leg.
I'm an ex-footballer, I know what that's all about.
So if you look at the stick-up bits of leather, which we know they had, we've unfortunately found these, and it's even shown on some of the carvings, that is the nearest thing you've got to protecting your foot from somebody else's hobnails. And you also find in long grass where you've got almost the lattice and straps. If you adopt an attitude of almost kicking an imaginary football as you go through, those stick-up bits act like the bow of a ship on the water, and it moves the grass out the way. It doesn't get prone to getting stuck into the boots.
Because I often wondered, you see, but obviously we know that the Romans came from Rome, which is a far nicer climate than ours. And was that the one thing which they didn't really think about when they came to basically our climate, which isn't good?
Well, the climate then, by the way that people look at all the different science, like some of the ice from Antarctica and so on, the climate appears to have been warmer and wetter. But in the winter, and I'm only wearing what they wear in the summer, I mean, the Armour is generating heat. I'm very fortunate to be in the shade today. In the winter, you are wearing long-sleeved garments, you're wearing trousers, because you're in a fort, and in the fort, you get the chance to do your laundry. Whereas if you're on campaign, it's day after day after day. I mean, these guys would have been rusty, they would have been dirty. You would have smelt a Roman legion basically before you saw it, because they're like soldiers. I mean, imagine when you see the soldiers coming off Salisbury Plain after a 5-day exercise. The first thing they want is a drink, a meal, and a shower.
Of course.
And the Roman army would be the same way.
Would have been exactly the same, of course.
And the boots in actual fact are similar to the ones that the Greeks were wearing. The famous Greek warriors at Thermopylae would have been wearing a very similar boot to this. And Rome's big ability is to look at what the locals have got, what the empire has got, and adapt it. They are very open-minded, and that's the point that I make to school children, because we have this term about not in my backyard or not invented here. The Romans are the other way round. What can we do with that? And that's how they had success.
Did they ever have, I mean, they were warlike, for want of a better analogy. Was there any particular foes that they were particularly, I wouldn't say scared of, but apprehensive of?
The Germans, obviously, with their forests. You can't fight in forests in this equipment. I mean, this is the ideal thing. A nice big grass area where we can lay our army out, like almost putting out the pieces on a chessboard. Now, you go into forests, you've got very little sideway vision. It would interfere with your hearing, and several of Rome's major defeats happen in forests. And of course, the Persians, because the Persians can put out troops, particularly archers and cavalry, that are better than the Romans. So they've got the people that can fire arrows, and they've got the mobile troops, and that's why Rome and Persia have this standoff that goes on for several hundred years.
Yes, I suppose any well-organised army is an army to be apprehensive of, isn't it? And
well, I mean, they're trained, they're motivated, and let's be honest with soldiers, no one wants to go to war, but I would imagine with a soldier, if you do, you want to know how you're going to perform against another team, in the same as when you were playing football. It was, how am I going to get on against my opposing player? Absolutely. It's that type of setting yourself a target. That's what's made the human beings what they are. And in archaeology, as they're doing here today, we're seeing how people have made Devizes better. But you now have proper toilets, you now have proper running water. Some of the material coming out from Roman times, their standard of living was good, but you wouldn't want to swap life in 2013 for life in 213, because you'd recognise the differences of how far we've come. And that's something that the human being is really good at doing, is making their life better.
That's absolutely fascinating. It's been really, really interesting talking to you. I'm sure that you've all found it interesting as well. So, Julius, thank you very much.
Vale.
Vale.
Indeed.